Granblue Fantasy Relink is a game with a very fun combat system, and also has a pretty surprising amount of combat depth. The general mechanical system itself isn't super overly complicated, but the amount of gear customization in the game combined with all of the character-specific mechanics and unique raid fights means there is a lot of potential talking points when talking about the combat of this game. In this video, I kinda wanted to give a general overview of the system itself with some tips, along with talking about the equipment system and gear setup, and ways to make grinding that gear easier. I'm sure there isn't a shortage of somewhat similar guides out there, but I do hope this one can manage to be useful to both newer players and players of post-game alike, as far as increasing your build optimization and making your grind for that optimization easier. If you enjoy guide content for RPGs and for Relink and want to see more, please be sure to subscribe to the channel because it does help me out so much. And if you haven't bought the game yet, but are mildly interested, hopefully this video might be enough to convince you that the gameplay of this game is sick. Let's get into this. So rather than jump straight into combat, I want to start with the menus and customization features you have access to, along with how to maximize your efficiency with setup and grinding equipment, because I feel for a game like this, that may be the more useful information for people checking out this video. The mechanics of combat and some tips related to that will be time-stamped a bit later in the video. First things first, you have the party menu. There isn't a ton to say about this. This is just where you can swap out members of your party or remove them entirely until you only have one character. I'm not sure what button it is on every controller, but you can also save party loadouts here. Each character has different strengths and different playstyles, and the AI is actually pretty decent in this game at staying alive if nothing else, so forming your party here can be an underrated aspect of gameplay if you plan to play solo content over online with others. Supportive effects may gain more value for AI teammates. You can also see a quick overview of basic stats for each character, but that is likely even better shown in the gear menu right underneath the party menu. At the bottom left of the screen, you have all of the general stats for your characters. Next to your level, you'll see the element of the character, which indicates the type of damage that they primarily deal. If you're fighting enemies weak to that element, you will do 20% more damage unconditionally than normal, so it's a very nice way to increase your damage. The green number is your maximum health, or how much damage you can take before you die. The red number is your attack stat, basically what your attack is going to be at all times without any additional modifiers. I assume this is applied differently based on the skill or attack that you use based on some hidden multiplier depending on what skill it is. This can be boosted based on your sigil setup, however some sigils, while boosting your attack, will not show up in this number if the attack increases based on a conditional. For instance, Tyranny will always increase your attack by a set amount in exchange for lowering your max health. This will always apply in combat, so it will always be shown in these stats. However, Stamina's attack increase varies depending on your current health in combat, so this boost will not show on the stat screen. The number to the right of your max health is your critical hit rate, essentially how often your attacks are going to deal additional damage. The amount of additional damage can vary depending on the character and gear equipped, but it usually ends up being a very significant bonus, making critical hit one of the best stats in the game. The stat below this is stun power. This is essentially a measure of how fast you can fill up the blue stun bar of an enemy. Upon doing so, it will trigger a link attack and stun the enemy for a few seconds, giving you some free time to act. The higher your stun power, the faster your attacks will fill up this bar. We'll talk a little bit more about link attacks later. There is a cooldown after fully filling the bar and triggering the stun and link attack. This probably isn't the most useful stat most of the time, but it can be something nice to have. And finally, the stat underneath this is power. To my knowledge, this is just an overall estimation of the total strength of the character based on your stats and sigils equipped. The stronger your gear, the higher this number is going to be. I do not believe it has any actual combat benefits. If you highlight and click on the character, you will be able to see their weapon and sigils in more detail. Starting things off, you have your weapon. Every character will have one weapon by default and 3 to 4 weapons that can be crafted. Story-important characters usually have a weapon that can be found in a chest during story mode as well. And finally, every character has their best weapon that is a semi-rare drop from the final Proud Mode raid, likely as a reward and necessary prep for any future content. You can equip any of these weapons as they all have different values for attack, health, and bonus traits that they offer you. This will likely be a level 25 and level 15 trait that gives every weapon something before getting your Terminus weapon a potential use. The Terminus weapon is absolutely the best one, but each of these weapons specialize in different things. Personally, I'm a big fan of the high critical hit rate and critical damage weapons on characters before getting their Terminus weapon. The sigils will also offer you these bonus traits as well, and outside of specific sigils, most sigils can have up to 2 of these traits on them. When maxed out, every character gets access to 12 sigils total, meaning there is a lot of customization options for these. So because these sigils also have traits, let's talk about that. The traits on your weapon and sigils are essentially bonuses of differing strengths based on the total level of the trait you have. You gain these traits from your weapon, from your imbue on your weapon, which I'll get to in a second, and from your sigils, which again can have up to 2 traits each. If a sigil has the plus sign next to the name, that means it is a 2-trait sigil. Sigils also come in 5 levels. By in-game, you'll want to basically only be using level 5 or 5 plus sigils unless you have some absolutely incredible traits on a level 4 sigil and nothing better to equip. Level 5 sigils start at level 11 and can be upgraded all the way to level 15, whereas level 4 sigils max out at only level 10, and level 3 sigils max out at only level 6. Early game sigils are very disposable because of that. There is an option to see all of the traits you have at a glance by pressing down on the right stick, at least on my controller, and the option to see the traits in more detail, which gives you exact specifics about how the traits work based on the level that you are at, and the bonus the trait grants at all other levels as well. As you might imagine, there are some really strong traits and sigils you can obtain in the game. Traits are divided into different color classes as well. You cannot have 2 of the same color trait on a sigil unless it is a character-specific sigil that has both traits on it. This means you can't have 2 orange traits or 2 blue traits on the same sigil. The gray or white traits are general stat boosts and can have any other traits attached to them. Orange traits are more offensive traits and can also have any other colors attached to them. Blue traits are defensive in nature and can only have purple traits attached to them, and purple traits are utility-based and cannot have any additional traits if they are the main trait of the sigil. This means you want your purple traits and blue traits to be attached to orange trait sigils ideally, especially since the offensive traits are usually the best in the game, and you want to maximize your slots for offensive traits in most situations. I don't have time to talk about every single sigil in this video, as it's probably a topic for a different video, but as a very important tip, damage cap sigils are probably the most important sigils in the game for higher level content. The damage cap in this game is remarkably low and different for every character and every single skill, so what one skill might max out at is not what another skill will max out at. For example, my Rose maxes her plant auto attacks around 32,000, but Love Loss will max out at over 600,000. If your damage numbers are exactly the same every time you use a move, that means you have reached the damage cap for that move. That means the only way to increase your damage further is by raising your damage cap through traits or other means, and as such, if you want to be doing any decent amount of damage to endgame bosses, you need to have these equipped. This trait goes all the way to level 65 and 250% damage cap, and even at this level, with just a couple attack boosting sigils, will likely still be hitting damage caps. I assume that this is a way to not allow content to be trivialized by hyper-optimized offensive builds akin to something like Xenoblade. Make sure you are taking advantage of this sigil. Another great sigil is War Elemental, which allows you to always hit most enemies for an additional 20% bonus, which bypasses this damage cap since it always acts like you were hitting weaknesses. Like I said, though, I'm not going to talk about every single sigil and their effects, since I think that is going to be best reserved for a different video. So let's talk about the best way to obtain these level 5 plus sigils and the best way to upgrade these sigils and your weapon in the most efficient way possible. There are a couple different ways to obtain level 5 plus sigils. The primary way is likely just going to be random drops from Proud Mode missions as you continue doing them. This is a decent method for racking up a decent number of them, but it can be difficult to really kind of fish for the specific sigils you want, and many unique sigils cannot be obtained through this method. Now, the most efficient way for getting good sigils that I have found involves a lot of stockpiling and lots of save scumming. So if you go to this location called the Knickknack Shop, after you beat the game, there is a feature called Transmute Sigils. So under this menu, level 1 and 2 are entirely useless, but what we're really looking at is level 3 Transmutation and Transmarble at the bottom. Now, I believe Transmarble doesn't unlock until you get the final difficulty options, but that's where all your best sigils are going to come from. How this works is that you essentially gain knickknack vouchers from both completing missions and melting materials and sigils you don't need under the knickknack vouchers section of the same shop. You can get a lot of tickets this way, which can help out a lot. And essentially, when you use these tickets to do a level 3 transmutation, you will gain essentially 15 points that fills the Transmarble meter below. It takes 150 points to fully fill the bar, so that is 10 level 3 transmutations. When it is fully filled, you gain a stock of Transmarvel, and by using Transmarvel, you get access to some of the strongest sigils in the game, including most general stat level 5 plus sigils that are possible. And character unique sigils that have bonus effects only for that character, which can be nice and cannot be obtained anywhere else, at least the plus versions of them. Now, the problem is it's still a bit of an annoying and random gotcha, so getting these sigils you want with the exact subset you want can be a huge pain. So the best strategy is to take time to clean out your inventory, stock up on a bunch of Transmarble stock, save before rolling, which is critically important, and just roll a ton at once. If you roll for a long time and don't get anything super good or anything you really wanted, simply reset the game without saving. All your Transmarble stock will be returned. Now, simply resetting the game will not reset the RNG seed, however, but completing a single mission will. So the strategy is to transmarvel, do a quick mission, then transmarvel again and fish for sigils you actually want. If you get one, immediately save afterwards so the least amount of transmarvel stock is used. I highly recommend using this method to save yourself a headache and trying to get strong character-specific sigils and strong level 5 plus sigils. The save selling method is one of the main ways I obtained many of my stronger sigils. The final way to obtain sigils is curios boxes that can be appraised. You usually get one of these per higher level mission. Unfortunately, this cannot be save scum, since what you get seems to be determined when you initially get the box, so unfortunately you'll be at the mercy of the game's RNG here, which really sucks because a lot of strong sigils can only be obtained through this method, like War Elemental and Supplementary Damage. As far as upgrading your weapon and your sigils, that is where the blacksmith comes into play. Normally, for each weapon, for every character, you'll need to forge the weapon if you don't have it, which costs some materials, but usually nothing too crazy or hard to get. Level up the weapon with fortitude crystals, and also uncap the weapon with materials you have so you can level it up even further, all the way to level 150 for every single weapon. The materials will get more valuable and harder to get at higher levels. Sigils are much the same way. You can level up your sigils one individual level at a time, with higher level sigils requiring rare materials, and level 5 plus sigils requiring even more rare materials on top of that, making farming quite the pain for many of these. Not to mention that fortitude crystals are needed for every single weapon, meaning you will need a lot of those to level up everything. Fortunately, there is an easier solution to uncapping your weapons and leveling up your sigils much easier, and that comes in the form of two items, the Damascus Ingot and the Azurite's Splendor. These are really nice items because the ingot can be used to immediately uncap the next level of a weapon without needing any other materials, and the Azurite Splendor will immediately max out the level of any sigil no matter what it is. Some absolutely incredible effects. Normally this would require a lot of material and grinding a lot of missions to get those drops, but these make it much easier. The only problem is they aren't too common. You get some from achievements and a couple from some other sources, and can buy them with gold dahlia badges at the knickknack shop, but for the most part they are not readily available. Fortunately, there is a way to obtain these much easier. If you go to the mission desk, the first mission under Maniac is Slime Peed, which essentially has you killing a bunch of slimes. Now, very rarely during this mission, and I mean very rarely, a prismatic slime will spawn. This may not appear for multiple attempts, but if you keep at it, then it will eventually appear, and killing the slime will drop a lot of Azurite Splendor and Damascus Ingot. This is by far the easiest way to obtain these materials, and absolutely the best way to max out your sigils. As far as weapons, I would save the ingot to uncap your levels from level 125 to 150. But regardless, this mission is your absolute best way to level up your gear in the most efficient way possible, and it also drops a lot of experience, money, and mastery points, making it one of the most efficient missions in the entire game to do. You'll likely find no shortage of players searching for it either if you play online. As far as fortitude crystals, which you'll need a lot of if you're leveling up weapons, the best missions for this are either the 2 boss enemy Maniac missions, which can drop around 30 large fortitude crystals each time, but can also be somewhat of a pain to do, but it is likely the fastest method, or the extreme mission Great Goblins of Fire, which is very turn your brain off and drops around 30 medium crystals and 10 large crystals. Whichever you choose, you'll likely be playing it a lot, especially if you want to max out multiple characters, since in order to have a character to their maximum potential, you'll need to max out all of their weapons. As far as final customization features of weapons, you have the ability to imbue weapons with right stones for even more traits, which you absolutely should do. The traits are the same as sigils, so not too much else there to go over. It's just an additional way to get stronger. And then you also have Mirage Munitions, which offer a very minor boost to attack and health, which you may as well just do because it does give a little bit extra if nothing else. For your Terminus weapon and Ascendant weapons in particular, you can also upgrade them even further at the Knickknack shop, which can give you some really nice bonuses, and one of the reasons the Terminus weapon is far and away the best weapon for everyone. Since maxed out, it gives Sigil Booster, which increases all your traits by 1 level. This will require a lot of money and drops from the hardest missions in the game, and there's no way to skip this part, so you may as well get used to grinding those missions. At least the game is really fun, and I really like those rates. That was a lot of information on customization and grinding, but there's still a couple more things to talk about in the menu. The first is skills. I'll be very brief. This is just where you equip the 4 skills you want to use in combat. What skills you have can change your character's playstyle or give you strengths in different areas. Each character has a mix of offensive and defensive or supportive skills to use. Usually there is going to be a best set of skills, but really just experiment to see what you like, because a lot of these skills can be useful in some situations no matter what. And finally, we have Masteries. The offense and defense trees are pretty straightforward as you get mastery points, level up your masteries to get more stats, abilities, and bonus effects for your character. The entire team shares these points, so be aware of that when you invest points into a character. The collection section unlocks additional masteries based on the weapons you own and the levels of those weapons, which is why you said you'll need to level everything to max to be fully optimal for a character. These include some really nice stat increases and even damage cap increases for your Terminus weapon, so make sure you aren't neglecting these. And finally, we have Overmastery. This section allows you to gain additional random bonuses for your character by spending mastery points. These bonuses range from general strat ups to even more damage cap increases and are absolutely worth going for to get good effects. Critical hit rate up in particular can be annoying to come by, and even more damage cap up is always beneficial, so these are some of the absolute best stats in the game you can get. The only unfortunate thing is this is once again random gacha, and trying to get the role you want can waste a ton of mastery points to get the exact bonuses you need per character. Fortunately, just like Transmarvel, this actually can be saved scum in the exact same way. So for whatever character you have, stock up on mastery points, save before rolling, roll a bunch, and if you don't get a role you want or the stats you want, reset and do a mission to reset the RNG seed and try again. This is one method to make your life a little bit easier at the very least. So that was certainly a lot. So let's get into actual combat itself now. Compared to all the complexity with gear and setup, the actual mechanical side of combat isn't too difficult to understand, at least generally. Each character has their own unique traits and playstyle, and many characters feel vastly different to others, which is really sick, and some of them can be pretty damn complex. But regardless, a lot of general principles do remain the same. So starting things off, you typically have a standard attack button that can be comboed into itself multiple times. You can see this in the bottom right corner of the screen. For me, this is just the X button. Use it to attack in the direction you are facing. Press either the left trigger or left bumper button depending on your bindings to lock onto the enemy, so you're always attacking a specific enemy with your attacks. Your other attacking button, in my case Y, usually will be your combo finisher or something used after X moves, but not always. Once again, it depends on the character since each character has different unique mechanics, but many times this is another attack button that is used in tandem with your normal attacks or has some unique gimmick related to your kit. It is usually going to be a stronger attack. For the main character in particular, combo finisher increases the power of his skills. The other two button bindings listed here are Link Attack, which can only be used when the opponent's blue bar is filled. As mentioned previously, this fills quicker with more stun power and has a short cooldown once it is triggered since it stuns the enemy for a few seconds. It will trigger faster the more you attack and the more damage you deal to an enemy. It also fills the Link percent seen in the middle right of the screen, which is shared between the entire party. And then of course, there is Jump, which can be used for jumping over certain attacks, or can be used right before the attack button to launch weaker enemy types. Usually that part isn't worth worrying about since boss enemies and the most important raids are completely unaffected. In the air, you typically have an aerial combo and finisher as well, which is different from your other attacks, but usually, and I say usually, not as strong. Once again, character by character basis. There is also the ability to dash while moving around in combat in this game, which can help you reposition or avoid attacks easier by pressing down on the left stick. You also have the ability to guard and dodge, and these are usually assigned to one of your two L or R buttons as well. The guard in this game is actually really good, and I actually recommend using it often if you find yourself in a bad situation or see an attack coming but don't think you can move out of the way in time. Guarding an attack means taking 0 damage from it unless your guard fully breaks, but it actually takes a lot of damage to fully break it, so it works more often than you'd think against a lot of really strong attacks that could one-shot you. If you guard at the exact moment an attack connects, you'll even perfect guard, which won't do any damage to your shield at all, and also inflict a bit of stun damage on the enemy. This timing usually isn't worth worrying about, in my opinion, over your regular guarding, since you can sit there holding it all day without many negative consequences and still take 0 damage from the attack if your guard isn't low. If you guard too many attacks in a row, your shield will start to break. When the color turns from blue to yellow then to red, that means it will likely break with one more attack, so do be careful. If you want to go for perfect guard, it would likely be better just to go for a perfect dodge instead, which is the stronger of the two buttons and also easier to perform perfectly. So dodging essentially allows your character to roll in a particular direction and gives some mobility while also being immune to attacks for a short duration during the dodge. Now you can only dodge 3 times in a row before you will be stunned in place for a little bit after using a dodge unless you have a specific sigil that makes it easier. It is not as safe as guarding generally, but it can be nice to just roll over certain projectiles or ground-based attacks coming at you easier. However, if you dodge at the exact moment an attack is about to hit you, you'll gain invincibility for a few seconds, which is really nice because during this duration, nothing will affect you at all. And there is even a sigil that will increase how long this invincibility lasts, which can be awesome. The better you get at dodging, the easier it'll be not to take damage in this game. But remember, for safety, guarding is typically going to be the better option for you and your team. Dodging can absolutely be the way to go if you're confident in your skills, though. I really like dodging for quickly moving out of AoEs that can't be guarded and keeping myself in a good position relative to the enemy, so it's harder for attacks to connect. One last thing that you'll see in the general user interface here is in the bottom left corner of the screen, you have some potions which are assigned to the D-pad, at least if you are on controller. If you have Potion Hoarder as a sigil effect, you'll have a lot of these potions. These can range from restoring about half of your health with the top option. With the left option, you'll restore your health fully. The bottom option are revival potions that will revive you instantly, which is really nice. And the right option is the blue potion, which will restore health to your entire team and also fill the link percent slightly. So it can be good to use just for that if you're really close to 100% on that bar. If you do manage to get hit in this game, you can actually use the dodge button to roll out of the hit if you are about to land on the ground so you can recover easier from the hit instead of being staggered. And there's also a way to kind of nullify any kind of hit stun from damage if you have Stout Heart equipped or have any kind of ability that grants you the Stout Heart effect. And if you do end up dying and you don't have a potion to revive you, you can have your allies revive you, or if an ally dies, you can revive them by going over to them and holding down the A button or whatever your general button is assigned to in order to revive them faster. While you are dead, the meter called the critical meter will tick down, and if this meter reaches 0, then you have lost the fight, no matter what. Even if everyone else is still alive, if this meter reaches 0, you have failed the mission and you have to retry. This is one reason revival potions can be very useful, because it allows you to basically instantly revive yourself without using any of the meter. Sometimes it might be beneficial to even save these revival potions if you're worried about later parts of a fight, so do keep that in mind as well. Regardless, it's very beneficial to revive your allies, have allies revive you faster because it'll waste less of the critical meter. So those are all of the basic mechanics of combat, so let's talk about skills now. By holding down the right bumper, or whatever it's bound to for you, and pressing one of your standard buttons, you can use a skill, and I apologize if I accidentally called them arts. These skills are usually offensive abilities that can output some nice damage, or defensive abilities that can support you and your team. They have a cooldown attached to them before you can use them again. Typically, how you want to use the skills varies by character as usual, which is why I'm making guides on them, but ideally you'll want to be using your skills when you can off cooldown to get the most benefit from them and to make sure you're not wasting any time in fights that you could be taking advantage of them. Now, of course, sometimes it might be right before a big burst window or something when you stun the enemy in one of a couple ways, so you may want to save your cooldowns for that, and that is totally fine. Many times saving cooldowns for these big burst moments can be ideal, since bosses usually have phases where they can take drastically reduced damage during big attacks where you don't want to waste skills anyway. But using more skills and doing more combos leads to charging up your SBA meter, which can be seen under your health bar in the top left. SBA, or Skybound Art, is essentially your special attack in this game. When the meter reaches 100%, you can press down on both sticks to shoot out an attack in front of you, and if it hits the enemy, you'll perform the move. If you don't hit the enemy, you'll go back down to 80% and you have to refill the rest again. This move will always stun the enemy for a bit and give you a chance to follow up with one of your partner's Skybound Arts and continue the chain. When you use one, it also fills your partner's meter by 10%, so if anyone in your party is at 90% or above, you can use this to get them there. Even if someone is at 70%, they can be brought to 100% by 3 allies using this in a row. And the more you chain the boss, the longer the boss is stunned and the more damage you can output during this window. Using a Skybound Art also fills the link percent, and if all 4 party members use their Skybound Art in the same window, you will trigger a full burst. I think I've heard that one before. A full burst will do pretty massive amounts of damage to the enemy and keep them stunned even longer afterwards, so you can continue unloading damage on them, and much of the time will be something nice to aim for. In certain fights with certain optimized setups, you may intentionally only chain 2 people at a time, but usually a full burst is going to be fine to go for. Full bursts will also fill the link percent to basically full, which brings me to the final part of the system, which is link time. Link time is basically triggering a link attack with every character when this meter is at 100%, which means filling the blue stun bar of an enemy and using link attack with everyone. Doing this will trigger link time, during which the enemy will be slowed down massively and every character will get unique bonuses related to their kit that are usually extremely strong, and you'll get rapidly reduced skill cooldowns if you have those from your mastery tree, which lets you spam skills during this time period. The more damage you deal, the more you'll extend the link time meter and the longer link time will last, so make sure you unload as much as you can during this period. Ideally, some of your fastest fights will chain link time and SBA together to keep the enemy stun locked for a good 50% or more of its health bar, which is one of the best strategies in the game and something I highly recommend learning how to do. This also means timing everything on the stun bar the enemy is almost off cooldown and not using SBA right after link attacks, otherwise you'll miss this window and have to wait for an opportunity to use link time, and likely the boss is going to enrage or use a special attack or something. Of course, that also relies on your teammates, so if there's any other advice I can offer, try to find some reliable friends to play with so you can discuss fights in real time, because I do think it helps out a lot. I think that covers most of the actual mechanical side of combat generally. Once again, many characters have their own unique mechanics and intricacies that are really fun to use and explore, and some of that can be pretty complex, but I feel like there's just so much variety in the combat of this game because of it. I'm still absolutely having a blast playing it, and I hope that you are too. And I also hope that you learned something from watching this video, and if you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support me any other way you can. I have a Discord server where I tag everyone when I release a new video, so you can always keep updated on that, and I also have a Relink channel in the server if you want to talk about it with other players. I have a Twitter you can follow if you also want to know when I'm releasing videos that way, or just see me talk about a bunch of random things, because I talk about a bunch of different things there. So there's plenty of ways you can support. If you have any feedback, please be sure to let me know as well. I'm always looking for ways to improve these guides, and once again, if reception is good enough, I want to cover all of the characters eventually, as well as do some more general guides for the game. Thank you all so much for watching and for the support. Please look forward to all of my future guides on the game, and have a wonderful and blessed day.